My mother-in-law stood up at my daughter's graduation party, tapped a spoon against her wine glass until the backyard went quiet, and told 40 of our closest friends and family that she was the reason Maya was going to college at all. Then she looked right at me while she said it. I'm Renee. My husband is Doug. Our daughter Maya had just graduated third in her class, and we'd spent 8 months planning this open house, string lights over the patio, a taco truck, a banner Maya's little cousins had painted. It was supposed to be one uncomplicated good afternoon. I should have known better than to expect one uncomplicated afternoon with Carol in the yard. Carol has been my mother-in-law for 19 years, and in that time I have learned that she does not attend events so much as she annexes them. She'd shown up 2 hours early to help, which meant rearranging the dessert table so her bakery box cupcakes sat in front of the ones Maya had actually asked for, and introducing herself to Maya's teachers as the one who made all this possible. She'd also quietly moved the framed photo collage Maya's friends had made, years of school pictures, team photos, prom, off the main table and onto a side chair, replacing it with a single studio portrait of herself holding a baby Maya, taken, as far as I can tell, the only time she ever babysat. I let the first few comments go. You let a lot of things go with Carol because engaging is its own kind of losing. The tuition question had been a sore subject in our house for exactly one reason. Carol never let anyone forget she'd once mentioned setting up a college fund for Maya, back when Maya was 7. She brought it up at holidays. She brought it up at Maya's dance recitals. She brought it up once at a funeral. What she never did was open an actual account, contribute an actual dollar, or produce so much as a bank statement when Doug gently asked, twice, over the years how the fund was coming along. Each time, she changed the subject to how hurt she was that we'd even ask. The real money for Maya's tuition came from 4 years of Doug picking up weekend shifts at the hardware store, from my raise finally landing after 3 years of asking for it, and from a merit scholarship Maya had worked for since freshman year, staying up past midnight rewriting application essays until they were right. We had the acceptance letter. We had the scholarship award notice. We had, taped to the inside of Maya's closet door where she could see it every morning, a savings tracker we'd built together, dollar by dollar, since she was in 9th grade. None of that involved Carol, so when Carol tapped that wine glass and announced to the yard that she was so proud to have made sure this girl would never worry about paying for school, I felt Doug go rigid beside me. Maya, holding a paper plate of tacos, looked at her grandmother with the particular blankness of a teenager watching an adult say something so brazen it briefly stops registering as real. Carol kept going. She said she'd always known this day would come and that she hoped Maya would remember who believed in her first. She raised her glass toward Maya like she was accepting an award. A few guests actually raised theirs back because most people at a party assume the person giving a toast is telling the truth. That's the whole mechanism Carol runs on. She's never lied to someone who was already suspicious of her. She only ever needs the room that isn't. I want to say I handled the first incident with total composure, but the truth is I just stood there, jaw tight, doing the math on how much of this I could let go for the sake of not ruining Maya's day. That's always been the trade Carol offers everyone in this family: swallow it, or become the villain who made a scene at a happy occasion. I'd swallowed a lot of scenes over 19 years. The seating chart at Doug's sister's wedding, rearranged so Carol sat at the head table instead of the actual in-laws. The nursery Carol helped decorate for our nephew, which somehow ended up with a plaque crediting her as the sole designer. The neighborhood fundraiser she claimed to have organized single-handedly, when the actual organizer was a woman named Priya who Carol had shouted down in a group chat until she quietly stopped attending. I might have let the tuition toast go too, filed under things Carol says that technically require a scene to correct. But Carol didn't stop at the toast. 2 weeks earlier, at the college send-off dinner Doug's parents hosted, Carol had stood at the head of that table too and told Maya, in front of Doug's entire side of the family, that once Maya graduated college she'd expect to be paid back the family way, meaning, she clarified with a small laugh, that Maya could start contributing to Carol's retirement once she had a real job, since Carol had carried her financially all these years. Maya had gone quiet for the rest of that dinner. She didn't bring it up until we were driving home, staring out the window, asking me in a small voice whether she actually owed her grandmother money she didn't know about. That was the moment this stopped being a toast I could roll my eyes through. Carol wasn't just taking credit in front of strangers for one afternoon. She was building a claim on my daughter's future paychecks, based on a debt that had never existed, and she was doing it methodically enough that Maya was starting to believe it. I spent that night after Maya went to bed pulling every piece of paper we had into one place, because I finally understood Carol wasn't improvising these speeches. She'd been laying track for this exact toast for 11 years, and if I didn't put a stop to it in front of the same audience she'd been performing for, she'd just keep doing it at every milestone Meyer ever had: the wedding, the first house, the first grandchild. I wasn't managing an awkward comment anymore. I was managing a pattern that had a deadline, and the deadline was this backyard right now. So while Carol was still mid-toast, glass raised, I walked into the house and got the lockbox. It's an unglamorous gray fireproof lockbox that lives on the top shelf of our hall closet, and it holds exactly the kind of paperwork nobody thinks is interesting until the day it's the only thing that matters. I'd spent that night after the dinner sorting through it: Maya's scholarship award letter, the merit certificate from her school, 4 years of pay stubs from Doug's weekend shifts I'd printed out and dated, my own raise letter from HR, and the savings tracker photographed off the closet door, printed in color. I hadn't packed it for the party, planning to use it as a prop. I'd packed it because some instinct told me Carol wasn't going to let this go unspoken, and I wanted to be ready instead of blindsided a second time. I walked back out to the patio, set the lockbox on the dessert table right next to Carol's cupcakes, and asked her, pleasantly, to say again which account the college fund had been sitting in, because Maya's financial aid office would need the account number for their records. I said it exactly that plainly, in the same toast voice she'd used, so the whole yard could hear the question land. Carol's glass didn't go down so much as it drifted, like she was deciding whether the honest move was to keep smiling or start explaining. She said the account had been more of a promise than a formal thing, and that formal paperwork wasn't really the point of family. I asked which bank. She said she'd have to check. I asked roughly when it was opened. She said sometime around Maya's christening, then corrected herself to sometime after, then said she didn't see why this had turned into an interrogation at a graduation party. It hadn't turned into anything. I'd asked one question, twice, and watched the answer move 3 times. That was Carol speak for something that never existed. I opened the lockbox and started reading, out loud, item by item: the scholarship letter, the pay stubs, the raise letter, the savings tracker, not shouting, not editorializing, just reading the dates and the names on each document the way you'd read a receipt back to a cashier who'd charged you twice. Doug's mother, standing near the taco truck, went very still. Doug's father suddenly found something urgent to say to the caterer. Maya was the one who spoke next, and she didn't sound like a kid anymore. She asked Carol, in front of everyone, whether the retirement comment 2 weeks earlier had been serious, and if it had been, whether Carol could point to a single dollar in that lockbox that had come from her. Carol said the word technically twice, in 2 different sentences, and neither one attached itself to an actual number. Meyer asked a 3rd time, more slowly, whether there was one receipt, one deposit slip, one anything with a date on it. Carol didn't answer that one at all. She set her cupcake plate down on the table with a little too much care and said she thought people were being very ungrateful for a lifetime of support, which is what Carol says instead of admitting a number. Doug, who spends most family conflicts trying to keep the peace between his mother and everyone else, finally said the thing I'd been waiting 19 years to hear him say in public: that his mother had never opened that account, that he'd asked her directly twice and been redirected both times, and that Maya didn't owe anyone a cent of her own scholarship money. He said it quietly, not for effect, which somehow landed harder than if he'd raised his voice. Carol looked around the yard for the room that would take her side. It wasn't there. Even her own husband was studying the ice in his drink. She left about 20 minutes later, telling 3 separate people on her way out that she'd been ambushed, which is the closest Carol ever comes to a confession. She never says she was wrong, only that she was caught somewhere she didn't expect to be caught. Doug's father stayed, quietly refilled his plate, and told Meyer on his way past that the scholarship letter was, in his exact words, the best thing anyone's brought to a party in years. A few of the guests who'd raised their glasses to Carol's toast came and found Meyer afterward to actually congratulate her, really congratulate her, for the essays and the late nights, once they understood what they'd almost applauded instead. Doug's sister pulled me aside by the drink cooler before she left and admitted, quietly, that Carol had tried the exact same retirement payback line on her own son 2 years earlier, right after his first job offer, and that she talked him out of feeling obligated before it ever became a public performance. She said she'd always wondered if Carol would eventually try it on Maya too, since Maya was the one grandchild who'd actually earned something big enough to hang a speech on. Hearing that didn't make me angrier so much as it made the whole afternoon click into place. This had never been about Maya specifically. Maya was just the next name on a script Carol had been rehearsing for years, and this backyard was only the first time someone had stopped her mid-performance instead of managing her around it afterward. The party recovered faster than I expected. The taco truck ran until 9. Maya's friends made her do a slideshow of embarrassing childhood photos that had nothing to do with any of it, and for a while the backyard just sounded like a graduation party again, which was all any of us had wanted from the start. Carol called Doug the next morning, not to apologize, but to ask why we'd chosen to embarrass her instead of discussing it privately. Doug reminded her, calmly, that she'd chosen a backyard full of witnesses to announce a debt that didn't exist and that privacy was never on the table the moment she picked up that glass. She hung up on him. We haven't heard from her since, which in Carol's language is either a punishment or a ceasefire, and at this point in our marriage, Doug and I have stopped caring which. Maya kept the scholarship letter and the savings tracker in a frame on her dorm room desk this fall, not as a trophy over her grandmother, but because she told me she wanted to look at proof of her own work every morning instead of someone else's version of it. She also, on her own, went back through her financial aid portal and double-checked that no one but Doug and I had ever been listed as a contact or a contributor on any of her accounts, a 5-minute task that told me she'd absorbed the actual lesson of that afternoon faster than I had, at her age. The lockbox went back to the top shelf of the hall closet, gray and unglamorous, waiting for whatever the next milestone turns out to be. Knowing Carol, we won't have to wait long to find out.